Thank you for inviting me in your midst. Okay. I was asked to talk about inequality and various other such economic issues. So I thought let me begin by saying what the government's position is. The government, of course, claims that the economy is the fastest growing economy among the large economies. It also claims that poverty has gone down. The recent multi-dimensional poverty figures that have been brought out. And says that all this improvement has come in spite of the pandemic, in spite of the Ukraine war. So it claims that their policies have been very good. It also claims that the United Nations has come out with a report supporting them. The IMF has come out with reports saying that the rate of growth is 6%, 7%, and so on and so forth. The question is, what is the reality? This is what the government claims. And it says that we have international backing, international support for this. We need to really analyze it to see where the reality lies. Now, in India, as we know, that there's an economic divide. And the problem, therefore, comes in terms of the data that the government puts out. There is the unorganized sector, which is very large in terms of employment, 94%, and the organized sector, which employs 6%. The unorganized sector produces 45% of the output, organized sector produces 55%. Now, it's this divide that is what the problem is. Because of this divide, what's happened is during demonetization, then the implementation of GST, then the NBFC crisis, and then the lockdown, it's the unorganized sector that declined unambiguously. It got hit very hard. So in other words, 94% of the employment, 45% of the output was hit very hard. And unfortunately, this does not come into our data. Why does it not come into our data? Because the unorganized sector data from agriculture is available, but from non-agriculture is not available. It is simply assumed that the unorganized sector is growing at the same rate as the organized sector. Now that may have been true before demonetization, but certainly not true after demonetization. During demonetization, we saw the shops were empty, the factories were not working, the wholesale markets were empty. In agriculture, you saw large impact of the demonetization. People didn't have cash. So you saw images of Shimla mirch being thrown in Punjab on the road, flowers in the Pune market rotting because nobody is coming to buy flowers. In Delhi, we interviewed on 23rd November of that year, some people in the Rain Baseras. And one, beggar lady said, I used to get 200 to 300 rupees. Now I don't get 20 rupees and I can't feed my 4 children, So in other words, the impact on the unorganized sector was unambiguous. It declined. And that is not captured. So why is that not captured? Because of the 39 sub-sectors of the unorganized sector, 29 are measured using the organized sector data. So in other words, you are using organized sector as a proxy for the unorganized sector. So the organized sector was rising, but the unorganized sector is declining. So the declining sector is proxied by a rising sector. And that's why our GDP is overrepresenting. And we have enough evidence of that. If you look at it, e-commerce has been rising at 20, 30, 40%. When the economy is hardly rising at 6%, that only means it is rising so fast at the expense of the neighborhood stores, the retail stores that are there in our neighborhood. And you can see that in the pandemic, large number of people shifted from going to the neighborhood stores to e-commerce. So e-commerce growth is what is captured in the GDP, but the decline in the unorganized sector is not captured. You can see the Hindustan Unilever's report last year. It says our market share is going up because the small sector is not able to cope. You see Mr. Jagannathan of the pressure cooker industry, he writes saying that there are 30 units in the pressure cooker industry, 25 in the small sector and 5 in the large sector. These 5 units, demand has been growing at 24% and our profits are shooting up. But the 25 are not able to cope. So the 25 are declining, so our rate of growth is 24%. So sector by sector, if you look at the thing, whether it's textile sector, leather goods sector, luggage industry, luggage industry, Mr. Piramal was being interviewed on CNN, and he said, we are growing rapidly because the unorganized sector and the luggage industry is not able to cope. So sector by sector, you find this data that the organized sector is growing, the unorganized sector has been declining, it's facing a crisis, and Tamil Nadu has a lot of unorganized sector, and reports from there are that they are doing rather poorly. Many of them have closed down, and this is the picture everywhere in the country. So therefore, our data is suspect, and when the organized sector is rising, and you're proxying the unorganized sector by that, your GDP is not rising. So that's why we've been arguing that during demonetization, when we saw that the economy was declining for 5 months, I went to Gwalior in March of 2017, and the wholesale market had not opened. The dealers said, people are not coming. So that was 5 months after. So for 5 months, the GDP did not grow. And yet our official data shows that in the 2016-17 year, the GDP grew at 8%, the highest growth during that decade. Whereas actually the data should have been that it was actually declining. So therefore it shows that the errors are very large in our economy. You can also see in 2021-22 RBI data for 2,700 companies, the sample of 2,700 that they use, that shows 41% increase in output, in the value of output. Okay, when the economy is not growing, if they are growing at 41%, the other sector must have been declining. And when the organized sector rises and the unorganized sector declines, because the organized sector is the one that only employs 6%, the unorganized sector employs 94%, unemployment becomes a problem. So unemployment begins to be a problem. Now this problem was coming up even before the pandemic came. The official data itself showed that from 2017-18 quarter 4, the rate of growth officially was 8%, and just before the pandemic it had dropped to 3.3%. Okay, so even the official rate of growth was declining. If you could include in that a decline of 10% in the unorganized sector, then even before the pandemic came, the rate of growth had turned negative. So we were already in a recession before the pandemic came, and of course during the recession there's a pandemic. And post the pandemic, you can see it's the organized sector that's rising. The stock market rise reflects the rise in the profitability of the organized sector. So it's not the unorganized sector that's rising. So in other words, the rate of growth of the economy has not been 6 to 7% as the government claims. It's between 0 to 2.5% that it has been growing. So therefore, the claim that we have moved from 10th largest economy to the 5th largest economy is not correct. In my judgment, we are still probably the 8th or the 9th largest economy. Therefore, to say that now we are the 5th largest economy in the world and we'll become a 3rd largest economy in the world by 2029, on what basis can we say? Because our rate of growth clearly is more around 1 or 2% at this point of time, or even negative given the decline in the unorganized sector. So this claim of the government is not quite correct. Now, if that claim is not correct, then what implication does it have for employment? Because it's in the unorganized sector that the bulk of the people are, and if the unorganized sector is not rising, it's declining. So we have produced a report on employment and unemployment, which was released in October 11th last year, in which we showed that 320 million Indians have some kind of proper job, but 280 million Indians don't have a proper job. And we argued that there are 4 kinds of unemployment that are there in the Indian economy. First are those who are in the labor force, but they are not able to find a job. Okay, that's about 8% or thereabouts. Okay, then you have disguised unemployment in agriculture, those who go to the field but don't have work. So they don't have proper work, they don't have any income from that. Then you have the underemployed, because if you look at the data, our data says if you get 1 hour of work in the week, you are employed. But can you sustain your family with 1 hour of work? Indeed not. So underemployed. There are large number of underemployed. And then those who've given up looking for work, our labor force participation rate is about 45%, whereas in comparable other countries like Brazil, China, and the US, it's 65%. That means 20% less are working in India. And that comes to 19 crores. So therefore, the total who don't have proper work is 270 million Indians. Now, in that case, what happens is that 320 million have to support 1.4 billion. That means each individual who's got a proper work has to support 4 people. And that's why even if your wage is higher, you have to support many people, and therefore family poverty is large. If these 270 million also had work, then each person would support one other person, the family poverty would come down. So therefore, employment generation is very critical. And employment generation will only take place if we boost the unorganized sectors. It's the unorganized sector where, if you look at the data, there are 6,000 large units, 6 lakh small and medium units, and 6 crore micro units. So there's a factor of 100 between each. And we talk mostly about these 6,000 large units and medium units. But we don't talk about the small and the unorganized sector, the micro units. It's the micro units where 97.5% of the employment of the MSME comes from the micro units. And the micro units are closing down. They are in trouble, and that's why unemployment is very large. So in other words, we have to support the micro units. We have to cooperatize them and boost them so that they can begin to provide a lot of employment. Now, if you look at the incomes of these people in the unorganized sector, the e-Shram portal was set up because the Supreme Court scolded the government, and the e-Shram portal was set up. What does the data in the e-Shram portal tell us? 28 crore people were registered up to November, as the Prime Minister himself said last week. Of the 28 crore, 94% said we are earning less than 10,000 rupees per month. So you can imagine the level at which people are working, these 10,000 rupees of income, and they have to support 4 people. So family poverty is going to be clearly very high. And what's the World Bank poverty line? The World Bank poverty line is now $2.15 per person per day. That translates for a family of 5 to 26,500 rupees per month per family. And the individuals are earning around 10,000. Now that's in PPP terms. You can deflate it, etc. But still, most of the unorganized sector would be close to the poverty line. So this argument that we've reduced poverty greatly is also not correct. So the government is pursuing a twin strategy. On the one hand, the Chaebol model of South Korea, that we promote the large, the Tatas, the Adanis, the Ambanis, give them all kinds of assets, whether it be infrastructure and so on and so forth. And when you give them all these assets, okay, they become rich, and that's why the number of billionaires is rising. But on the other hand, keep the poor poor and make them labhartis. Give them some, gas, cylinders, this, that, and the other. And then at the time of election, say that we have given you so much. But the question is, how much have we been giving these people? My estimate is that since the time of demonetization, the unorganized sector has been losing about 10 to 12 lakh crores per annum. What they get as labharti is only 3 lakh crores per annum. So in other words, the loss to the poor is roughly of the order of 75 lakh crores in the last 7 years, whereas the gain they've made is 21 lakh crores. But 20 lakh crores is in hand, 75 lakh crores is hypothetical, and therefore people look at what they're getting immediately. But this is something that the opposition should make clear to the public, that what they're getting is peanuts compared to what they're losing as a result of government policies. Whether it be demonetization, the structurally incorrect GST, the NBFC crisis, and Mr. Jawahar Sarkar pointed a little bit towards that crisis that in the banking system, and then the sudden lockdown that took place. Now add to that the black economy. The black economy leads to policy failures and to wastage of resources. There's flight of capital from the country. So all the problems I mentioned, they get aggravated further as a result of the black economy. As a result of the black economy, I've shown that India has been losing 5% of the rate of growth of the economy. So India could have been a much larger economy, and this government says that we have been trying to tackle the black economy, but as the data from GST collections and the recent data of how much GST evasion is there, the daily cases that you see, the black income generation continues. So in other words, the crisis that is there has been continuing. Now, there are other issues that could be flagged, but time being short, I would not go into the problems of the new technology, the artificial intelligence, the job losses that are likely to take place in the coming years, the problems of education and R&D. Those are all problems that we need to look at. But the black income generation, if it had been tackled, the tax GDP ratio should have gone up. The tax GDP ratio has remained roughly around 16 to 17%. It has not gone up. Direct tax to GDP ratio has remained around 5.5%, 6%, whereas if the black economy had been tackled, it should have gone up to about 11, 12%. So in other words, the black economy has not been tackled in spite of everything that the government says. So to conclude, our GDP and poverty data is incorrect, and I think the opposition needs to highlight that very severely. that these data that the government is putting out is not correct. The unorganized sector is unambiguously losing, and that's 94%. That needs to be brought out very clearly. Then growth has been highly skewed. The top has been rising, but the bottom has been falling off. This is very important to say. Then the economy is not short of resources. They are wasted. The resources are wasted. So you can spend a lot more on education, health, and other such things for the poor, but that's not being done. We need to generate jobs for these 280 million who don't have proper work. And if you give them 30% of the per capita income, that would cost you 5% of the GDP, but the GDP would go up 16%. In other words, full employment can be self-financing if it is properly done. So employment has to be focused on. So in other words, farmers, workers, and youth, that grouping, that has to be taken on hold, and the campaigning should be done along with them. So this new alliance, needs a new consciousness, and the opposition needs to build that consciousness. Thank you very much for your patience.